Hello, everybody. This is Mitchell Miller with BlazerTV.com. I'm joined by our football correspondent. He knows a little bit about basketball, too. He's laughing over there because he says that I bring him down as far as mentioning the football thing and a basketball.
I've written about basketball. I mean, I've helped you with basketball.
Obviously here because there's some big news out in the UAB sector. We thought it was a big deal when we got Garrick McGee and that hire, and it looks like just 4 months later we have another big surprise mix-up.
And this time, obviously I think we're trying to establish higher expectations and standards for UAB football. But I don't think there's much doubt still that when you first think about UAB athletically, it's the basketball program that comes to mind that Gene Bartow built. And, this surprised some 12 months ago. Coach Davis, much different situation than now, but the leash a little bit shorter on for basketball on the south side.
Yeah, I think so. And that's something that, we have a lot of stuff coming up on this little special here. We have an interview with Steve Irvine of the Birmingham News, who, anybody in the media, he's the closest to the situation you could possibly be. We got a little interview with him coming up. You're going to see here in a little bit. We also are going to talk with James Thrasher, who is he's our site or webmaster for BlazerTV.com. He is on the Twitter sphere and the social media. He's going to give us that side of what the fan base and some of the ex-players are talking about as far as this firing and moving forward with the coaching hire. But here's a little bit of some highlights of the Brian Mackin press conference announcing that Mike Davis would not be retained for next season.
After a lengthy evaluation of our men's basketball program, we have decided to make a change in our leadership. This decision was not made quickly, nor was it an easy decision. This move was made with the best interest of our UAB basketball program. We appreciate all the efforts and contributions that Mike Davis and his staff have made to UAB and to our basketball program over the last 6 years. I consider Mike Davis a friend, and this decision will not affect that relationship in the future. At UAB, there's high expectations for our basketball program. This program has great history and tradition started by the late Gene Bartow, and we are committed to uphold that standard. As athletic director, I looked at the big picture of the program, of where we are right now. I made an evaluation looking at the full body of work. While our team has experienced a certain level of success during the last 6 years, we're not where we want to be. We have seen an increase in apathy amongst our fan base, drop in attendance, as well as a decrease in ticket revenues, the number of tickets sold, and scholarship dollars. We have also not seen success on the court in the postseason at the levels that we are accustomed to at UAB. The lack of NCAA appearances and our performance in the conference tournaments have been disappointing. On the academic side, we have made great strides with improving our APR, and we're committed to continuing that success. We intend to do a national search that will start immediately for our new basketball coach. Mike and I had a meeting on Wednesday to really just talk through the options that were in front of us. We went home and thought about those, and told him I'd get back with him. My responsibilities with the women's basketball regional in Tallahassee. I was supposed to be down there today, this afternoon, but kind of delayed that with the importance of this. But I talked to Mike about 11 o'clock today to make that decision. Well, you look at our program over the last 34 years, and I think we've been to the postseason, whether it be, I think it's 14 NCAAs, 11 NITs over that period of time. So the majority of the time we're going to postseason play. And I also look at over those 34 years, we've had 3 losing seasons, and 2 of those have come in this 6-year period. So I think our people are used to go into the postseason. I know that it's just very important, and winning in the postseason. I would say that it's very important in this city to have a face in that community that can excite our fan base and sell tickets and create that environment in Bartow Arena that is pretty special. Obviously, the academic side of the profile is important to me, as it is to Dr. Garrison, and recruiting the right student athletes into the program. Well, I think this basketball program is viewed nationally as a very, very good program, without a doubt. I think we have made our mark nationally, being in postseason, having success, beating the Kentuckys, beating the Indianas. So I feel like this job is very much a high-profile job, and I do not expect any shortcomings in coaches wanting to interview for this job. Well, the signing date starts April 11th, and so obviously making the announcement now gives us time to hire a new coaching staff and for them to be able to go out and recruit. So timeline, I want to get the best coach, and that process will start now. And our football search was very quick. I would hope that we could move quickly on it, but at the same time, there are a lot of postseason teams playing now, and potential candidates could be involved in those tournaments. So we'll just have to start that process and do the best we can.
So those are obviously some of the thoughts of Brian Mackin answering some questions from the Birmingham press. Tyler, what do you think about this situation in general? I mean, a little bit of a background on what happened, obviously, is if you didn't get it from the press conference. Wednesday of this past week, Mike Davis and Brian Mackin, the athletic director for UAB, sat down, had a conversation about his future. Friday morning at 11 a.m., Mike Davis was instructed, not instructed, but told that he would not be retained for the next season, that his contract, that his employment at UAB as a head basketball coach would be terminated. Shortly after that, Mike Davis, from what we could understand, Mike Davis went to Andy Katz.
Looks like he went public very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly after that, went to Andy Katz of ESPN, and that story broke out. So press conference was at 4 o'clock, and that's when you just saw there. Tyler, what do you feel about this initially when you heard the news?
Well, initially I was very surprised because I thought we would hear a decision next week. I did not expect anything to happen this week. If you knew anything about Mackin, Brian Mackin had some other obligations where he was out of state. Obviously, he had to come back to handle this. I really expected it to be mid to late next week before we knew anything. I really thought it was possible that there would be a coaching change because in Mitch, you know, we know that it goes far beyond wins and losses when you're talking about Mike Davis. Yeah, we mentioned last year they won the conference championship. They also made an NCAA tournament appearance last year. But there's a lot of other things beneath the surface that I think had been applying pressure to Coach Davis since very early in his tenure here. And, you know, UAB has actually only had 3 losing seasons in program history. 2 of them have been under Mike Davis in his 6 years here. And I was surprised at the timing, but I was not at all shocked that they're moving in a different direction.
And I don't think anybody is necessarily that has been connected as far as media-wise and who's been within the athletic department seeing what's going on. I think last year the sign that, you know, Mackin did not extend Mike Davis's contract last year, and that was made a big deal. I think that kind of the warning shot. I mean, he won.
Boy, that looks like a good decision today, doesn't it?
Well, I guess. I mean, what with the season, yes.
Looks like a good decision on his part.
Yeah, to not extend that contract, yes. And a lot of people were questioning that after he got Coach of the Year. But it's been a troublesome road for Mike Davis at UAB. I think there was actually an article in the Birmingham News by John Solomon either today or yesterday, or I think it was today, about how he never really got that that rapport with fans. He never got that rapport with fans, and that ultimately hurt him when he needed to fall back on something. The fans in general weren't quite supportive of him.
Yeah, I mean, the guy who developed the relationship with the fan base was probably Donnie Marsh through his blog, and I think he kind of carried that role of being the maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the connection between the fans and the coaching staff.
Kind of the PR guy.
That was Donnie in a lot of ways, Coach Marsh. Yeah, he didn't, and it was very similar to the Neil Callaway situation. I think that he was more in touch with the fan base than Callaway was, but that's not exactly a compliment either. So I think you had both. UAB was in a situation just a few months ago where you had both of your flagship athletic programs that had a little bit that the head guys had a disconnect with the fan base, and that's not a good thing when you're UAB.
Tyler, we're going to get to James, our webmaster, talking about the Twitter aspect of all this. But first, we are joined by a very special guest from the Birmingham News. He has been on this. I'm sure he's the closest we can get to in the situation involving Mike Davis, and can go over some stuff with us in the era that is closing this week. Is Steve Irvine, Birmingham News. Thanks, Steve, for coming on with us today.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on.
First question, when did you kind of realize that this was going to happen, and how did you discover it, and what was your initial thoughts?
Well, I kind of was worried about it a little bit. I don't know if worry is the right word, but I kind of thought, late in the year that something could happen. I know there was some talk, and there were some people, fan-wise and that type of thing, that were dissatisfied, and then, just this week, Wednesday, I talked to a couple people, and I knew that Coach Davis and Brian Mackin had met and had talked about some things, and it heard it might, stretch out to next week, but kind of wrote that it might, but to be honest with you, I sort of thought something was going to happen by the end of the week, whether it be them decide to bring him back for his final year or fire him, and found out for sure that it happened, right pretty soon after the meeting, after when they met on Friday morning. I actually talked to Coach Davis pretty much right after the meeting. It just happened to call him, and he let me know what had happened. So it was something that was, it really happened kind of quickly once it happened, but it was stretched out over a few weeks also.
Well, you mentioned you spoke with Coach Davis. Did he express that did he seem surprised, or did he think he was coming back next year, or was he considering that he really might be fired?
Well, I mean, I think he was, he thought he should be back, but I mean, I think he knew there was a possibility. Obviously anytime that you're told that might happen, then you can't be surprised over it. I think he was surprised. I mean, I know he was surprised that it ever got to that spot. I mean, I think that late in the season, I talked to him a few times about it. Never really on the record, but off the record a lot about just that he couldn't believe that that they were in that position. He didn't think that he thought with everything that had happened this year, with his personal life and also with Hoopy Jones not being able to play and Tyler Bryan not being able to play, and and the fact that they had 4 straight 20-win seasons going in this year and the championship last year, the regular season championship. He was surprised it got that point, but I think once it happened, again toward the end, I think once you're told it might happen, I don't know if you're overly surprised at that point.
Right, and Brian Mackin made it clear in the press conference yesterday that this wasn't about last season specifically. It's about the body of work. I mean, what are some other things that you see as being a major contributing factor in his release?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think, and Brian Mack even touched on it yesterday, is I think the two biggest things were just the fan apathy, you know, or the fact that he never really meshed with the fans, and that's one thing about about Coach Davis is when you get to know him. I mean, there's been very few coaches that I've ever covered that are better people than Mike Davis. I mean, once you get to know him, he seems a little aloof at times if you don't really know him, and it's just, I mean, I think he's just sort of a shy nature, I think, but I think there were a lot of fans he just never meshed with, and I think that was a big thing. And the other thing, that's one thing, and the second thing is just postseason performance. I mean, as good as he did at times, I mean, hey, to win 4 straight regular season 20 wins. I mean, that's never been done in school history. But college basketball is a tournament game, and you have to do well in the postseason, and they obviously struggled in the postseason. So I think those are the postseason performance, and then just the fact that the fan base never really meshed with them. I think those are probably the two most prominent things, prominent reasons for this.
Well, Steve, obviously now that the coaching move has been made, you have already kind of gone on record of stating you expect a Garrett McGee type hire. So you're expecting a young up-and-coming coach potentially. What kind of a time frame do you think we could be looking at trying to get a new coach in here?
Well, honestly, I think it'll be a little longer than the football. Football finished in 8 days. From start to finish, it was 8 days. And I think it'll be a little longer for this one simply because a lot of these guys are going to be in postseason, obviously, and also I don't think they had quite the head start that they had. Cause I'll say this: I know through talking to some people that Brian Mackin was a tough decision on him. I mean, I think with the football decision, it was easy. By the end of it, you knew you had to make a change, and it really wasn't. He kind of got to work on that early, really, and I don't think that they've gotten that head start on this one. So I would think it could go, certainly 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Once you get the postseason. Now it could happen if their number one guy, if they target a guy real quick and they get him, then obviously it could end quicker. But I'm anticipating that it'll be something like a 2 to 3 week process.
Steve, does UAB take any kind of, I guess, PR hit at all as far as going out and hiring a coach with Mike Davis winning the conference coach of the year last year and the regular season championship player of the year? I mean, is there any kind of negativity nationally, do you think, as far as a stigma now attached to UAB of, whoa, I mean, he just won last year and all of a sudden he's fired?
I think a little bit. But I mean, here's the deal. To me, I think there is a little bit of that, but it's all about what have you done for me lately. So if, say for example, if they take a little hit right now, even though I think they deserve a hit personally, it bothers me that they fired him, with his record. But that being said, if you go out and hire, say just for example, a Chris Collins from Duke, who's a big national name, is going to be a big splash. Well, all of a sudden you forget about that. It's because again, it's what have you done for me lately type thing. If they can truly make a Garrett McGee type hire with that kind of splash, then I think maybe the criticism goes away pretty quick. But I do think there are some people that have a problem with it, and I understand people who have a problem with it.
Well, Steve, Brian Mack in the first few years he was here didn't have any major hires that he had to do, but now here he is in the last few months. He's doing basketball and football. Is there any doubt that this is going to be the measuring stick for his career, for his time here at UAB?
Well, as of right now, yeah, but it's one of those things that 2 years from now I could be doing the same thing. You never know. I mean, but I think that. Yeah, it measures stick in the sense that this is his really first one. Well, I mean, I guess Brian Chu, which was a great hire too, but you don't that doesn't kind of bring the attention. College baseball doesn't bring the attention that the other sports do. But so yeah, I think it's early measuring stick, I guess. And but it's one of those things that with an AD, it's your measuring sticks. I mean, it just happens a lot. That things happen, and different situations you have to handle, and it can change quickly. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, you look at Jeremy Foley at Florida. He's looked at as God, why are you hiring Ron Zook? But then he hires Urban Meyer, and he's a genius. So I mean, those things change, but it certainly is an early measuring stick.
Absolutely. We want to thank you for coming on with us. Quick couple of questions, real quick.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, what do you feel about the players? I mean, did you get a sense? Did you talk to Mike Davis after he found out? I mean, after it came out and known, have you talked to him? I noticed in one of your recent pieces he said he wouldn't comment further. I mean, did you hear anything from the players or for him specifically regarding the aftermath?
Well, I and not really from him, but I've talked to some people, and I think there's definitely a danger of some guys leaving, and when the program is in such a just a tenuous state with the APR, because really they're in good shape right now, but a couple little things could send them back under 930, because it has to be 930 now. And I think there's several guys. I mean, you look at Hoopy Jones. I mean, really all these guys that came here to play for Coach Davis. I mean, I think that's a danger, and not just in this situation. I think in any situation, and the difference in this situation is, you can't take these APR hits, because one thing that's kind of not talked about a lot now is the appeal process for the APR appeal process for postseason ban is over with. You can't appeal anymore. So it's simply a matter of, if you're below 930, you're done. You can't. At least that's the way it looks like it's going. That's what the NCAA wants. So, that's a difficult thing, and so you got to look at that. But I think in Brian Mackin's mind, for the good of the program overall, he felt like he had to make the move. But there is certainly a possibility that you're going to have some guys leaving.
Yeah, and we certainly see that with UConn trying to appeal for the 2013 postseason, doing all kinds of stuff, and the NCAA looks like they're really gonna be strict with it. One last question, Steve. What do you think when you look back? What do you think Mike Davis's legacy at UAB is going to be? Is it going to be that first four in, or is it going to be the regular season conference? Because when I look at it, I see more of a player's coach. We get players that the fans can fall in love with, and like Aaron Johnson and Cameron Moore and those type players. What do you think his legacy is going to be?
Well, I think it depends who you ask. I mean, I hope it's a guy who did a solid job. I think he did a solid job. Got him back in the NCAA. I know it was only 1 year, but he did get him back there, and won a lot of games, and won the conference. I mean, he did some good things. And I think what the Mike Davis detractors won't admit is, and I think they should, is because this reality is, getting to the NCAA tournament out of Conference USA is a lot tougher than it was when Mike Anderson was here. I know the teams are not as good. I understand that. But you're talking about, back in those days, if you finished 4th or 5th, you had a good chance of making the NCAA tournament. And, what Conference USA has become, that is, you pretty much have to win a conference, or, this year, obviously, they got the second place team, or the second place team in the regular season in. But, it's tougher. I mean, it is. So, I mean, I hope he's thought of as a guy who did a solid job, and, a guy who did some good things, obviously, with the conference championship and the NCAA tournament. I mean, I hope that's the way people think about it.
Absolutely, and obviously you brought up a very good point there about the conference being different. A lot of people have a short memory when it comes to that kind of thing. Even scheduling non-conference games, we look back at that season with Cincinnati at home, Georgia at home, and Butler at home. It's so tough. Nobody wants to schedule UAB at home anymore. So it is definitely a different environment, even in the last 3 years, to get some quality opponents in. So, Steve, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll be looking for your continued coverage in the Birmingham News and AL.com. Thank you for coming on with us today.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right. Steve Irvine from the Birmingham News. We can't get any closer to the action, can we, Tyler? I mean, that was right from the source.
And Steve, obviously showed some emotion there. Obviously, he has had a close relationship with Coach Davis, and I think Mike he's a great guy. I echo
absolutely.
What Steve said, and anytime when I started doing this, the very first time that I ever did anything on camera for Blazer TV was at the game last year where UAB won on the road at Southern Miss to win the conference championship game. I'm doing the interview back there, and Mike has never dealt with me. I mean, he's never had to talk with me, and the camera and everything's back there. And he gave me the same amount of respect he gave those guys that I know were there night in and night out. And he always handled us that way. I think we were always given good access by Coach Davis. And, he was a guy that did care about the program, cared about his players. And I hope that's how he's remembered. There's been some shortcomings, but I'll always have fond memories of Mike. And I echo what Steve says is, he's a really good person. And I hope everything works out for him in the future.
Well, this is, when you look at it, I mean, combined with this firing, and I'm sure a lot of people are viewing it like this, it's a business now. It really is. And Brian Mackin's obviously got a business background, and he was also an athlete at UAB. He knows what needs to happen. Obviously, a lot of people put a lot of trust in him with the Garrett McGee hire. I think a lot of people were looking at Brian Mackin questionably before that, extending Neil Callaway's contract, but that was something I think was going on behind the scenes.
Sure.
Obviously, Brian Mackin is playing all of his cards.
He is, and you mentioned college athletics is such a business now, and for the matter of saying that Mike Davis was a good man, I think Neil Callaway was a pretty good man. His players were pretty loyal to him. I think he did a lot of good things behind the scenes. But at the same time, in the business world, in the world we live in, good people get fired and laid off from any kind of job all the time. And even when they've done the job well, and that's just the nature of it. And, for UAB, new era in basketball. But before we look to that new era, you've compiled a pretty neat little list here.
Yeah, we at Blazer TV came up with this list. We have the 5 worst and 5 best moments of the Mike Davis era. We're going to go over them real quick. We're going to start with the worst. Obviously, because of the situation, obviously he was fired, so that's the more potent. But we're going to go with worst. We're going to go with tongue twister.
Going to go with the worst first.
And then we're going to go with the best to try and get that bad taste out of our mouths. So first, the first top 5 moment, Tyler.
Well, at number 5, we have this year the loss to UT Martin. UT Martin went 4-27 this year. They had 2 wins against Division I opponents, and you lost that game at home. Obviously Mike had this long non-conference winning streak that had been a big part of his resume here at UAB. I think it was already over at this point. I think he lost the season opening game at home, but then to turn around to go from that to losing at home to a 4-27 team that only had 2 wins over Division I opponents, and looking back at this game, no matter how much they were struggling at the time, if UAB had won this game, they wouldn't have had a losing season. They could have at least been 500. And, to avoid having that third losing season in school history, it would have been nice. And, that's what we put at number 5 was the loss at home this year to UT Martin.
Sure, but that wasn't the only loss at home, and that's where number 4 comes in of the 2011-2012 season this past year. You're going to see we got obviously some from this year. Is the most home losses in UAB school history for a season, and that was 7. 7 home losses this year. Not at all what UAB is used to, especially not under Mike Davis. Mike Davis known for that long home non-conference streak that he had that was in all the record books, and ESPN covered it a lot. To that change this year with 7 home losses, and that's just the UT Martin is just one of them. That's why it's 5th. But Tyler, the home loss schedule, it's just not good.
Well, Coach Davis always talked about the importance of winning at home. and making Bartow Arena a tough place to come, which he did for a majority of his time here. But you couldn't overlook the 7 losses this year. And number 3.
Well, and part of that home loss, Tyler, I'm sure after a couple home losses, the crowd started to diminish, and that made the other home losses
directly referenced in Brian Mackin's statements about the declining attendance and just the apathy of sorts toward UAB basketball this year. Just in only 1 year after winning the conference title, the 7 home losses had a lot to do with that. So looking at number 3, postseason struggles. Obviously 2-6 in the Conference USA tournament, and did make the first 4 last year, but it was a blowout defeat to Clemson. Usually this was a team that struggled not only in the postseason but down the stretch. The last month of the season, this was a team basically UAB played themselves out of some NCAA tournaments with some big games and a 2-6 record in the Conference USA tournament. And you look at the 2 wins. One game where UAB defeated Southern Miss, Paul Delaney just went insane. Pretty much carried that team on his back. And the other one was a first-round win over Tulane, who was the worst team in the conference this year, which I was still impressed they got the win without a point guard. With Quincy Taylor down, I'm not taking anything away from either one of those wins. But it wasn't marquee wins for the program, and to go 2-6 in the tournament. And also to lose the way they did against Clemson last year, that's tough. And that's number 3's postseason struggles for Mike Davis.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, that kind of goes into this year. So obviously a lot of recents on this list, and that's obviously part of the reason why we're talking about this right now. But number 2 on the list cannot be questioned: 0-11 against Memphis, including blowout losses like the loss to number 3 Memphis away back in 2007-2008 season, 94-56 in FedEx Forum. Obviously some close losses at home, but an 0-11 streak, just not good. Is that 0-11 or is it 0-12 now?
Look, I quit keeping track of that number, and I think at the point that you make a comment that it's going to take a miracle to beat a team, which Mike did this year, that made that probably made this even stronger on the list. You should never say it's going to take a miracle to beat any team, I don't think. And that was a very just never could get over the hump. And I think you did have some blowout losses, but UAB found so many ways to lose to Memphis over the course of the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I think it's actually, just to clarify, I think it's 0-12 for UAB, 0-11.
Yes, because Mike Davis, the last one, Mike Anderson lost his last game
in the
against
tournament
Memphis.
game.
That's correct.
I believe that's what it is. If that stat may still be wrong, we're going to have some people email us about that. Speaking of which, we're going to get to some emails in a second. I know you have to leave, but I'm going to cover some emails from a couple fans that emailed us giving their opinion. Also, just so you know, follow us on Twitter, blazertv.com. You can give all your opinions on there too, and we'll retweet you and get some stuff out there.
Absolutely.
But the number 1, Tyler.
And there's no doubt that this is the number 1. And this plagued him, really throughout most of the time he was at UAB, and that's UAB basketball. 2008, the academic progress rate drops to 16th lowest out of 337 Division I teams. And to take it a step further, what this team has dealt with. You've lost players like Ricky Tarrant, who is now at Tulane because of the higher academic standards, just so you could be in the tournament last year. That year, UAB, when they got hit, basically, this was a year after that they got hit with the sanctions, but the team that all the guys basically were academically ineligible at half year, you're talking about Walter Sharp, you're talking about Ed Barrios, guys who were contributing at a very high level. And this was a team that had beaten Arizona in the first half of the year and looked to be making an NCAA tournament run. And obviously all these injuries, all these issues they had with academics, you didn't realize till later, Channing Toney came in that year. He never stepped on the floor with Walter Sharp.
Yeah.
You never saw what that basketball team could be. That was the start of academic woes that followed him, really for 2 or 3 seasons there.
Sure. We also have some honorable mentions. I know you have one. I'm just going to throw this out there. I also think a low point in his tenure at UAB was in 2007-2008 season, I believe, at the very beginning of the season, if you remember.
Might have been right before the season started.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when it was, but 5 UAB basketball players. They were all incoming players. They were all newcomers,
including Robert Vaden.
They were arrested at a Birmingham club. It was bad pub all over the place. It got on the front page of ESPN on the basketball page. It was just, not a very good start to his career.
It wasn't, but I do think, to his credit, he handled that type of situation well to where it didn't happen again. Mm-hmm. That's why it probably doesn't make the top 5 list.
Yeah.
But and credit to him for, we didn't have a lot of character issues after that with players, but definitely not a highlight of his time here at UAB. And for me, one honorable mention is just the whole situation that surrounded DeMarcus Cousins. A lot of people, that left a bad taste in their mouth. A lot of that couldn't be helped. You look at DeMarcus Cousins now. Here we are years later, and he's still a very
He's a head case.
He's a head case. He's very theatrical, and there's probably not much Mike Davis could have done about that, but he did pretty much bank his whole recruiting class on getting DeMarcus Cousins, and that set back a little bit.
And there's speculation in that some people believe that he was getting them as a tag team to take them to another school with another job, and then it fell through, and that may have been why he wanted to sign that to begin with. The issue was that he wanted to sign a contract, so to speak, with UAB to say if Mike Davis leaves, then
then the player could leave as well.
And UAB was like, no, because I think maybe there was an idea that was going to happen, and UAB wasn't going to let that happen on them. Looking back now, that may have been better for some people when they look back and say, well, maybe if he had left with those players, we could have started over sooner, if that's the side of the coin you end on. But, yeah, definitely some of the worst moments in the Mike Davis era. But that's not all. There were some good moments. There were some good moments, Tyler.
Well, the top 5 good moments for us, 2009, 2010, the NIT run. Obviously, UAB was disappointed to be in the NIT. A lot of people thought that they had a chance to make the NCAA tournament that year. But once they got into the NIT that year, really the tournament became more important to a lot of UAB fans just because of how some things fell out. Number one, in the first round, you beat Coastal Carolina, a guy who said he was never going to step foot in Bartow Arena again by the name of Cliff Ellis was forced to come back to Bartow. And while that wasn't a largely attended game, a lot of the UAB faithful enjoyed seeing Cliff Ellis come in and get pounded in the first round game.
They also enjoyed seeing a young Tyler Cantrell dressed up as Hulk Hogan in the front of the student section.
Trying to put those days behind me. But also the next round, obviously NC State comes in. You beat an ACC team. That was a game, I believe, that was televised on nationwide on ESPNU. Anytime that you can beat a team from the ACC and beat them in Bartow, it's a big accomplishment. And really, that wasn't even close. That game was.
I believe that was actually on ESPN.
It may have been that they were run out of the gym. I mean, that was a bad game for the Wolfpack. And then just a few days later, UAB fell by 5 to the defending champions, also from the ACC, North Carolina. One of the largest crowds, if not the largest crowd in Bartow history that night. That was a wild atmosphere at that game. And
I think it ranks 10th highest in attendance.
Yeah, it was a very highly attended game for UAB, a very hardest ticket to get here, not named Memphis in a long time. And it was a great atmosphere. And obviously UAB had a chance to win that game. I don't think either team attending that game really ever got into a rhythm. Neither team really could do what they wanted, but it was a good game throughout. And that NIT run, was a high point for Mike Davis.
Oh, absolutely. It was a high point for the fan base as well. I'm sure there was a lot of ticket sales generated from that. Also, crazy that there were 3 Carolina teams.
Yeah, they were all 3 Carolina teams. Huh?
Yeah, it's a little strange. But number 4, I'll remember this because I drove up. Back then I was a fan. I drove up with a crew of 4. We went up to Louisville, Kentucky to play in Freedom Hall against the Kentucky Wildcats, who, if you remember before this, in 2007-2008 season, UAB knocked off the overall #1 seed in 2004, Kentucky Wildcats, as a 9 seed. A lot of hype in this game to try and win the series. The series was tied 2-2. UAB beats Kentucky on the back of Robert Vaden, who scored 33 points. I think 29 of those came in the second half.
That was a lot. He went crazy in the second half. He was the National Player of the Week.
Yeah.
He was the National Player of the Week.
So that was a big deal. 14,000 fans in there, most of them in Big Blue. So that was a pretty good win for the program. I think that's why it ranks over the NIT. I think we decided beforehand it was a little hard to put an NIT run in front of an actual regular season game.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, you look at that. I mean, there's a lot of apathy toward the NIT tournament. I think there's a lot of good that can come out of it. But definitely a regular season game. And UAB at Kentucky, the last year Mike Anderson was here, Kentucky defeated UAB in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That tied the series up. So now Mike Davis is the guy who led UAB back to the overall series lead against Kentucky. So definitely a good thing to hang your hat on there. And no love lost between Mike Davis and Kentucky fans from his days at Indiana either. So I'm sure Coach Davis enjoyed that game. Number 3, 2009-2010, the best start in school history, 18-2, including wins over Butler, who went to the national title game that year and didn't lose after leaving Bartow until the national title game. Also, big wins over Georgia and Cincinnati, all at home, and it resulted in the top 25 ranking for the Blazers. And I mean, just a really awesome start to that year.
Yeah, and that's another thing is, on the flip side of that could be the worst because that's a year where it kind of went downhill, like you mentioned, the last month, basically playing themselves out of the NCAA tournament. But the beginning of that season, we had some newcomers. We had George Drake that year.
Kenneth
Cooper, some new guys in there. Cameron Moore really stepped up at some of those games. So pretty good season right there to start. 18-2. That's the best in school history. It tied, I think, the best start in school history. I'm not.
And that was the first time that UAB had ever defeated Georgia. And I think that either that game or the first time they beat Arkansas, pretty much, I think that finished off that UAB had defeated all 12 SEC schools. So that was one of the scalps that had not been collected. Yeah. So that's a good little scalp there for UAB fans.
I want to say Tyler's getting a little dark in here. He's actually tanning throughout this entire thing. No, it's just the lighting's getting a little bad. We're on a lower budget, so we have to get some lighting in here to help with Tyler's dark face here.
Skin complexion.
Can't see him, but Tyler, number 2.
Well, obviously, the first NCAA appearance since 2006, going to the first 4 and taking on Clemson. For Mike, looking back at this now, without this trip to the NCAA tournament, he'd be the only coach in UAB history to never take the team there. But thankfully for him, that's not anything he'll ever have. And every coach in UAB history to this point has taken UAB to the big dance at least once, and Mike Davis is no different.
And buddy, was it a close call?
Yeah, it was as close as it could get. Dick Vitale's still upset about it, so is Jay Billis. But Mike Davis doesn't care, and he took him dancing, and the banner will forever be in Bartow Arena. So 2006 NCAA tournament appearance for Mike Davis and the UAB Blazers.
And number 1, obviously, is part of the reason there's so much controversy in this firing because it just happened last year, 2010-2011 season, the regular season Conference USA Championships, which you talked about. You were there. You covered it against Southern Miss when they clinched the tie, and then at home when they beat ECU to get it outright. Got the Player of the Year in Aaron Johnson, who was a Mike Davis recruit, who is one of the most cherished Blazers in history, I think, in the long run.
Without a doubt.
When you go back and look, he's going to be one of the all-time favorites. He's definitely I think he's my all-time favorite Blazer right now. Frank Holmes ranks up there because I know him personally, but Aaron Johnson, just an amazing guy and Player of the Year. And obviously Mike Davis won Coach of the Year. This is one of those years. I mean, obviously it resulted in that ranked number 2, but I think obviously it can't be ranked number 2 because of the loss in the game, getting blown out the way he was, the controversy in there. I don't think you could put that number one, but the regular season conference championship, the player of the year, the coach of the year, it was really just a moment for about a week and a half there. UAB was right back there on the map.
Well, and for that moment, for me, I know more Blazer fans got to go to the ECU game, and that moment was magical with Aaron Johnson's family being there and taking part in that, and you could tell the family aspect that Coach Davis and Aaron Johnson had. That was a special moment. But for me, the bigger moment was at Southern Miss. The bigger moment was when Preston Purifoy hit that shot, and the atmosphere. UAB had taken several hundred fans over there, it seemed like, and really just the air out of that arena and the relief on Mike Davis's face, because that clinched at least a share of the title. Obviously, we came home and won it outright, but those two games at the end of the year were as high as Mike Davis would ever get during his time at UAB.
Yep, and that's it. That's you got any honorable mentions on that, on the best moments? You got any that you think may have made the list but not quite?
Well,
it's kind of hard to. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry, the top moments. Anything else you think?
Yeah, I feel like that pretty much gets the top moments as well as it possibly could. They had a nice win in the NIT over VCU one year that I think, looking back now, what VCU's been able to do since then, and obviously Anthony Grant has been moved on to another school. I think now in retrospect that win looks better than it did then. But this is pretty much the top five for me.
Yeah, and it's, I guess it's top five moments in the Mike Davis era, not so much top five moments of Mike Davis. Obviously, the players,
sure.
And then he would even say it. A lot of this is all players.
You could put.
I put AJ graduating in there as maybe an honorable mention.
Sure,
absolutely. Not because a lot of people didn't expect AJ to graduate, but he was the first. Wasn't he the first one in his family to graduate?
Yes.
And, I mean, that was just a huge moment. And the injury with AJ, him coming back and being able to walk on his own without crutches, graduating, that was just something I think was very special.
That was a cool moment. So. Cool moment. And I would, too. One more moment I'll throw in there for him is just probably the developing rivalry that UAB's formed with UTEP in basketball. That's happened a lot during the Mike Davis era. There's been some really good games played there.
Absolutely. That triple overtime game's got to be in there.
It does. And there's just been some great games played with UTEP, whether Tony Barbie or Tim Floyd was the coach out there. And that, I think that's been something that has grown in the fan base's eyes as the rivalry with UTEP during the time that Mike's been here. So I would put that as an honorable mention as well.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that about wraps it up for the top fives. We're going to be right back. I think Tyler's got to leave right now, unfortunately. But we're going to talk. We're going to have a conversation real quick with James Thrasher, who's got the social media aspect of it. I'll be with him talking about that, and then I'll cover some of the fan emails and comments that we have following that. So we appreciate you coming on the special today, Tyler.
Well, obviously, Steve mentioned being a little surprised by the timing. If we seem a little bit just getting this back together and rushed, we were surprised by the timing. But, anytime something like this happens, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the program. And for me personally, I'm just anxious to see how Brian Mackin's going to follow up a hire like the one that he did with Garrett McGee in football. Is he going to get that type of a guy that's going to go out and promote the UAB basketball program the way that McGee is doing the football program right now? That's a big storyline for me, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens over the next week or so.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Tyler, for coming on, and we're going to be right back with James Thrasher, the webmaster and site administrator, and also editor of BlazerTV.com to get the take on what the fan base is saying about this situation. We'll be right back. All right, we've already had a lot of stuff going on in this special so far, but as I promised, we're talking to James Thrasher, webmaster, site administrator, social media genius for BlazerTV.com. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's BlazerTV, DOTCOM spelled out. A lot of times those tweets are handled by James. James is on with us today. James, How surprised were you that this happened so quickly? I mean, a lot of people were surprised. I mean, what are your thoughts on it initially, and then we'll get into some thoughts about the general fan base.
You know, I was kind of surprised that Brian Mackin went ahead and made the decision to go ahead and fire Mike Davis, considering next year was the last year on the contract. And I didn't get a chance to hear the actual press conference, but he said, I believe I saw where Brian Mackin said, if he wasn't going to be the coach of the future, then he might as well just go ahead and change now.
Yeah.
And that makes total sense, but I just didn't think that I think that would actually happen.
But I mean, with the Garrett McGee hire being only 4 months ago, I mean, a lot of people were saying 6 months ago that there was no control by UAB with its athletic programs at all, and now there's 2 coaching changes.
Right. Well, with the host stadium fiasco, that kind of by not getting the stadium, by being denied the way it was, that kind of almost gives Brian Mackin and the administration more freedom to do what they want.
Sure.
Because there's so much more of a spotlight on the relationship between the board of trustees and UAB in general. But that kind of does give Brian Mackin more power almost.
Yeah, you're right.
You did mention the Garrett McGee hire. It almost makes sense to sort of clean house right now and to start anew.
We're actually bringing you on to talk about Twitter a little bit. I mean, you've been watching. You mentioned to me how you were surprised about how the fan base is reacting. Yeah,
so just following all the mentions of Mike Davis. Mike Davis is actually trending on Twitter in the Birmingham area.
Wow.
And so just going through all the Twitter stream, and to be clear, Mike Davis is trending while Alabama was playing Creighton. That's how vocal people were on Twitter about the Mike Davis firing. And I was actually really surprised that a lot of people were Mike Davis supporters. And a lot of us, we talk to a lot of people who are sort of more of the diehard UAB fan base, and a lot of those people felt that Mike Davis should have been let go a while ago. And so to hear this different perspective from, I guess, more of the outside observers or the casual fans, they were really shocked and somewhat taken aback that Mike Davis was fired. But, a lot of people, like I said, were shocked that Davis was fired because just last year and they went to the NCAA tournament. That Davis was the coach of the year in Conference USA. And so a lot of people that were Mike Davis supporters were citing those reasons and saying that, it's crazy to fire a coach who just took you to the NCAA and he was also just named the Conference USA Coach of the Year.
Part of Twitter is that everybody can have one. Did you see any comments from former players or anybody like that? I mean, what's the mood like for those kind of guys?
Yeah, I saw a lot of comments from former Mike Davis basketball players, and they are really supportive of Mike Davis. They really look up to him. They really respect him, and they were kind of taken aback that Mike Davis was fired. I don't know if that would sour their relationship with the school in general in the future, but they were really sort of hurt almost that Mike Davis was fired.
Do you feel like they kind of get the sense that because Mike Davis was fired, and Brian Mackin said this in the press conference, he said it's not based off of last year, it's based off his whole body of work. Do you think maybe Mike Davis being fired kind of shows them that maybe their work at the school wasn't as valued as much because it wasn't worth enough to keep the coach that they played for?
No, I don't think they took it personally as, being indicative of how good or bad their play as individuals or as a team was. They just sort of, really look up to Mike Davis and consider him a father figure in a lot of different instances, and they're really appreciative that Mike Davis, gave them a second chance a lot of times because, Mike Davis did go after a lot of people who were who transferred from other schools or who were in the junior college ranks at the time. So they're really appreciative that, Mike Davis gave them a chance to get a college education and to get that 4-year degree. So, they were really supportive of Mike Davis in a personal sense, but in the same tone, they didn't take it personally as being indicative of their play or their accolades in college.
Are you hearing anything on Twitter sphere? I don't even know if that's the right word. You would be the one that knows that. But is there anything on Twitter about, possible next head coaches? Is there any talk about who people want to replace Mike Davis?
Yeah, it seems like immediately Andy Kennedy's name popped up. Now, I don't know if that's someone that the fan base wants because he's had mixed success at Ole Miss. But, Andy Kennedy obviously he's a former player, and his name immediately popped up. Someone else's name that I saw quite frequently was T.J. Cleveland. Now, he is someone who is from the Birmingham area, and he was correct me if I'm wrong, he's currently a assistant coach with Mike Anderson at Arkansas, correct?
He is, and he was an assistant for Anderson at UAB.
Okay, right, yeah. So his name has popped up almost as frequently as Andy Kennedy's on Twitter. He's someone who, if hired, would probably bring back the fastest 40.
Sure,
and which is a style of play that a lot of people in Birmingham missed. And as you say, one of the reasons Mike Davis was fired was because dwindling attendance. In my opinion, what that really means is people weren't excited about his style of play. That says to me that they're looking to go back to the fastest 40. So, in my opinion, T.J. Cleveland is probably at the top of the list right now. You guys might be hearing different things, though.
Well, let me ask you this. In response to that, reading on Twitter, how much did you hear Garrett McGee's name, 4 days before he was hired? How often did you hear his name in that conversation?
No, I don't think I did.
Exactly. So, how do you think? Do you think this is going to be a little different? Do you think it's going to be somebody that has some ties to UAB in some way, or is connected to that style of ball? Do you really think that's going to be, or do you think it's going to be a similar situation to Garrett McGee, where it's kind of an unknown, but once he's in, it's exciting?
Yeah, I think they're going to look at all the options, but by the administration citing dwindling attendance as one of the factors of firing Mike Davis, I really think they are looking for somebody. It may or may not be T.J. Cleveland, but they're looking for somebody to bring back the fastest 40, because they understand that that's a style of play that, number one, really brings in the fans. It's exciting. Number two, they understand that in the short history in the past few years, that's a style of play that they really want to bring back to Bartow Arena.
Well, James, thank you again. Again, you can follow James Thrasher. Your Twitter handle, your personal Twitter handle, what is that?
It's J Thrasher without the E in my last name, so J Thrasher.
Okay, and also he does a lot of stuff on BlazerTV.com's Twitter. Again, that's Blazer TV.com. James, thanks for coming on today and giving your thoughts, and also giving us a little bit of a look into what's going on in the social media aspect of all this.
Thank you.
And to wrap things up, here's some thoughts from you guys. You guys sent us some emails about your thoughts on Mike Davis. Here's some of them. This one is from Albert from Birmingham, Alabama. Regarding the firing of Coach Davis, I have mixed emotions. I've always expected our basketball team to be as competitive and exciting to watch as they were under the late Gene Bartow and Mike Anderson. That wasn't always the case from past observations, but there was some fond memories of some success achieved in the time Davis was here. Incredible how he went from being Conference USA Coach of the Year last season and winning the Conference USA outright in the regular season and securing an NCAA bid for the team to being dismissed the following season. I sure didn't want to see his tenure at UAB end in such heartbreaking fashion, especially given the loss of 3 beloved family members this last year. Just goes to show how life and its fortunes can change in the blink of an eye. I wasn't overly fond of his overall coaching style. It was, at times, in my opinion, too rigid and predictable. But when it worked like a charm. A change was perhaps inevitable, but I actually wanted him to come back next season and define his legacy at UAB in basketball, one way or the other. I felt he deserved that much. I was willing to dig my heels in and see what would transpire in 2012 to 2013, but it was not to be. I wish him well in the next chapter of his life, on and or off the court. Perhaps now both he and Blazers basketball can pick up the pieces of this melancholy moment in its history and carry on. God's grace to you, Coach Davis. Go Blazers. Unleash the Dragon. Thank you for that, Albert. I agree completely. As far as him being able to come back after this year, I don't want to say he was owed anything because he got a lot of money for what he is. Tyler mentioned earlier in the show that everybody loses jobs all the time for certain performance things, and I understand. I don't understand. I can't understand what he's going through with the family losses, but it is a job, and I don't know if anything would have been different had he taken the season off or said I can't do it this year and then got to come back. I don't know, but we'll never know. And it is unfortunate that he didn't get a chance to come back, and he didn't get a chance to end on a higher note than he did having a losing season. That's unfortunate. We also have Dakota from Hatton, Alabama, wrote us and said, for the first time in a long time, I have hope in UAB basketball. I always felt with Davis that we could only go so far. A coach hasn't been chosen yet, but I am already more excited about Blazer basketball than I ever was with Davis. So long, Davis. Obviously, not one of those parties who is upset about the firing, but eventually everybody's got to be on board with the new coach. It's going to happen no matter what. So at least Dakota's getting an early start. And that's going to do it, guys. We don't have enough time to get in anything else. Thanks for those who emailed and tweeted and watching this. If you're watching this, share it with others. Get it out there. We're trying to do more stuff like this. Obviously, it's a little bit of a situation where we weren't quite prepared. I don't think anybody was for what happened, so we tried to get things together really quickly. I hope you still enjoyed it, and we'll be seeing you. Check out BlazerTV.com. Follow us on Twitter. Type in BlazerTV.com and Facebook and check us out. We'll be doing more stuff always for you guys, the UAB fan base and general fans. If you just want to know a little bit more about what UAB has to offer in the sports realm, we're here to let you know and show you what you can do. Get us some tickets and come see for yourself. Thank you again for BlazerTV.com. This is Mitchell Miller, and for James Thrasher, Tyler Cantrell. Once again, we want to thank Steve Irvine and you guys for being a part of what we do. Thank you so much, and God bless, and go Blazers.